Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're taking a massive web of daily news and breaking it down into a unified look at how India is balancing rapid growth with ecological and public safety. So let's dive right into this fascinating matrix of progress, policy, and the perils that come with it.
To make sense of it all, we're going to move through 4 quick sections today. First, environment and water disputes. Second, India's energy transition. Third, the urban safety crises. And finally, global flashpoints.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Environment and Water Disputes. Let's look at how states are battling it out over our absolute most precious resources, water and land. When it comes to water, we're seeing this wild mix of friction and cooperation across state borders. Take the Meghadata Reservoir on the Kaveri River, for example. Karnataka wants to build new infrastructure to control the flow, right? But Tamil Nadu's chief minister is completely objecting, arguing it violates their rights as a downstream or lower riparian state. But then you look at the Tungabhadra Dam, and it's this fantastic example of cooperative federalism. You've got Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana literally pooling their money together to restore gates and clear out silt. It's a team effort. And then there's the Mullaperiyar Dam on the Periyar River. Kerala is super concerned about flood risks after warnings from IIT Madras, while Tamil Nadu, who actually operates the dam on a really old lease, insists there's absolutely no imminent danger. It's a constant push and pull. Now, shifting gears from water to land, we're seeing major clashes between the center and the states over the Western Ghats. For over a decade, policy has just been bouncing back and forth between two very different committee recommendations. Back in 2011, the Gadgil Committee said, hey, let's declare the entire 1.2 million square kilometers of the Western Ghats as an ecologically sensitive area. But the states pushed back hard. They were terrified it would just totally paralyze development. So a few years later, the Kasturi Committee stepped in, and they recommended protecting only 37% of the region, trying to strike some sort of balance between conservation and the state's needs for agriculture and infrastructure. Well, the central government just recently reissued a draft notification for the 7th time in 10 years, trying to lock in these protections. And if this draft finally goes through, some major activities are going to be strictly banned. We're talking no commercial mining, no stone quarrying, no sand mining, thermal power plants, out. Large construction projects and highly polluting industries, completely banned in these designated areas. The goal here is absolutely crucial, protecting a massively important biodiversity hotspot. But as we build these new policies to protect our environment, it really makes you wonder, how on earth are we going to manage our rapidly shifting energy needs? As we literally limit where we can build, we have to totally rethink how we generate power. Which brings us to Section 2, India's energy transition. Let's take a look at how our energy grid is kind of suffering from its own success and undergoing a massive legal overhaul. To put things into perspective, just think about this staggering number. As of June 2026, India hit 162.15 gigawatts of installed solar power capacity. I mean, that is a massive, massive milestone for our renewable energy goals. But there's a pretty big catch. Between April and June alone, we actually had to intentionally curtail, basically turn away and waste 8,133 gigawatt hours of that clean energy. Why? Well, simply because our current transmission grid just isn't stable enough to handle it all at once. We literally have too much of a good thing, but nowhere to put it. When the sun goes down, solar generation drops, sure, but our grid infrastructure just isn't robust enough yet to flawlessly store and transmit that huge daytime energy boom to everywhere it needs to go. So, to diversify the grid and guarantee steady power, the government is looking really heavily toward nuclear energy. Enter the SHANTI Act, the Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India. This is a brand new legal framework designed specifically to rapidly expand nuclear power. And the big game changer? It breaks the long-standing state monopoly and finally brings the private sector into the mix. This is a massive leap toward privatization. Previously, nuclear energy was 100% government-controlled with strict flat liability caps. But now, under the SHANTI Act, up to 49% foreign direct investment is allowed. Private operators are going to face graded liability caps, meaning their financial risk is limited based on the size of the reactor. And here's the kicker, equipment suppliers face zero liability. This actually aligns India with global standards, where the operator alone takes on the risk. Oh, and the regulatory board? It now answers directly to Parliament instead of individual ministers. But the crucial takeaway here is that bringing in private, profit-driven operators to handle something like nuclear reactors naturally triggers some pretty deep historical anxieties. When you cap the liability of private companies in hazardous industries, it instantly reminds citizens of the absolute liability debates that surrounded the devastating Bhopal gas tragedy. Because the big question is, who pays if damages exceed the cap? Well, that falls to the government, making this a hugely debated part of the transition. But as we build these massive new energy grids for the future, how are we managing the everyday, on-the-ground infrastructure of our cities right now? It's a sobering question, and it leads us straight into the human stakes of this whole development matrix. That brings us to Section 3, the urban safety crisis. Let's dive into the very real and, honestly, sometimes invisible threats lurking right now in our urban environments. According to a recent report by the Center for Global Development, there's an absolutely staggering statistic we need to talk about. 90%, yes, 90% of private schools in New Delhi sit within just 5 kilometers of a toxic site. We're talking about places like major garbage dumps emitting hazardous pollutants right near where kids go to learn. And one of the absolute most dangerous pollutants from these sites is lead. I want to walk you through exactly how this invisible toxic exposure systematically attacks a child's developing brain, because it's terrifying. First, toxic lead particles are inhaled or ingested. Then, the body tragically mistakes this lead for calcium, storing it deep inside the bones where it can just linger for years. Third, once it's in the bloodstream, the lead actively damages the myelin sheath, that's the protective layer around our brain cells. And finally, this nerve damage results in permanently lowered IQ, severely reduced learning capacity, and stunted physical growth. It is a silent crisis, and it could be affecting children in your own neighborhood right now. And sadly, we aren't just dealing with invisible threats. Our visible, everyday infrastructure is feeling us on multiple fronts. I mean, we've seen between 13,000 and 15,000 fire-related deaths reported just this year. In Lucknow, devastating commercial fires erupted in shops that were illegally built in residential zones. They had literally been ignoring demolition notices dating back to 2016. Then there's the incredibly tragic drowning deaths of students in flooded basement libraries at Delhi UPSC coaching centers. Severe waterlogging has claimed lives in Noida, and it's repeatedly crippled major tech hubs like Bangalore and Mumbai. It's gotten so bad that young students in Fatehpur have actually walked out of their classrooms to protest against their own unsafe school buildings. These are completely avoidable tragedies, and they point to a really harsh reality. The biggest hurdle to urban safety isn't a lack of early warning technology or fancy safety equipment. The real menace here is a lack of enforcement, and the systemic corruption that allows illegal basements, ignored fire notices, and toxic school locations to just persist year after year. So, zooming out from our domestic crises for a minute, how does historical context help us make sense of today's shifting global diplomacy? Because managing a nation also means navigating a very complex world. Let's move into our final segment, Section 4. Global flashpoints. We're going to look at a very specific recent diplomatic move that requires a pretty deep understanding of history to truly grasp. Recently, Iran pulled off a highly complex diplomatic balancing act. During a state funeral for their supreme leader, they invited representatives from both the Taliban and the Northern Alliance to attend. Now, to understand why inviting both of these groups to the same room is such a massive deal, we have to rewind and trace their blood-soaked history. The last few decades illustrate an incredibly bitter rivalry. Between 1989 and 1992, the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan, and the communist government completely collapsed. In the chaos of that power vacuum, the Taliban captured Kabul by 1996, imposing radical rule. Almost immediately, local warlords formed the Northern Alliance, led by the highly popular Ahmad Shah Massoud, just to resist the Taliban. Fast forward to September 9, 2001. Massoud was assassinated by al-Qaeda operatives acting on behalf of the Taliban. And of course, that happened just 2 days before the September 11 Twin Tower attacks. So seeing these two fiercely opposed groups sitting at the exact same event in Iran today, that is a truly fascinating diplomatic tightrope. So what are we supposed to take away from all this? Whether we're talking about carefully managing global diplomacy in the Middle East, balancing super contentious water disputes between our own states, finding safe ways to push past our energy limits, or just protecting our kids from urban toxicity, everything we've looked at today is intimately connected by the immense, overarching challenges of governance. As India races toward the future, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. Can we truly master this development matrix? Can we balance the push for rapid economic growth and private investment with the strict, unyielding regulations that we absolutely need to protect our most vulnerable citizens? It's a huge question. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. And remember to always keep questioning the world around you.